friends, welcome to Yoga Off the Mat. I'm your host, Divya. Yoga is one of the oldest and most sophisticated systems of human development that we have, and we're distributing it like fast food. The fast food, fast fashion vacation of yoga is real, it's accelerating, and nowhere is it more visible than in the yoga teacher training industry. Studios are churning out certified teachers the way that a franchise churns out employees. Volume is prioritized over depth, speed is prioritized over integrity, and a certificate at the end tells you very, very little about whether the person who's holding it has any real relationship with what they're teaching. Personally, I waited 15 years before I stepped into the role of a teacher. 15 years of practice before I even considered the prospect of it. And when I did decide to pursue a training, I didn't take the most convenient option or the most popular one. I researched programs for months. I looked at their curriculum in detail. I studied not just the asana modules, but also whether philosophy was treated with real seriousness as part of their program. I looked at the community that they served, their mission, their ethos as a business. I went and practiced at the studio and met with the teachers and the founder. I talked to past students and I listened carefully to how they spoke about their experience and about the studio in general. I focus on what they said, yes, but also how they said it. Did the training actually change them? Did they have enthusiasm and respect and reverence for the practice? And only after all that did I move forward. And I'm so glad I did it this way because I have no regrets. I'm telling you this not to position myself as exceptional, but because this level of discernment should be the standard. This should be the baseline for anyone who's considering becoming a yoga teacher. And right now, it's the exception and not the rule. So let's talk about how we got here, because it's a problem and it needs to be changed. Yoga teacher trainings in the West have become such a well-oiled pipeline. You pay anything from $2,000 to $10,000 to become a teacher, and the school gets a graduate, an ambassador, and someone who will likely buy more trainings from them, more certificates and more modules, and the cycle continues. What most of these programs are actually optimizing for is volume and profit. They're not looking at quality, they don't care about the depth, they're not thinking about the person who's actually standing there at the front of the class, who is leading all these students, and whether they've actually truly understood and absorbed the material. The question of whether those teachers are actually ready, whether the knowledge that they're passing down is deep enough, embodied enough, authentic enough to truly serve their students, it doesn't show up in the business model. It's not a priority. And the teacher is the one who ends up holding this gap. They're underpaid, they're undertrained, and they're overpromised this future that never comes to fruition because the industry was never built to support it in the first place. Fun fact, yoga was not actually meant to be taught this way. For most of history, yogic knowledge was passed down through what's called a Guru-Shishya parampara, or the teacher-student relationship. They actually lived in a place where this knowledge was embedded everywhere. They observed the lifestyle benefits and they embodied it as well. They were fully immersed in the practice from head to toe throughout their spirit. And it went beyond asana. It was the philosophy, the ethics, the service, the self-inquiry, the entire shebang. This is the lineage that we are now distributing through mass discounted programs online because people are just trying to make a buck. I want to be fair here. The modern yoga teacher training isn't going to go anywhere, and I'm not saying that it should necessarily. I completed one myself. I would be such a hypocrite if I was saying that. But the thing is, I completed it after 15 years of practice. I'm glad that yoga teacher trainings exist when they're done right. More teachers reaching more communities is ultimately the goal here, and it's a good thing. That's how we evangelize the practice. The model breaks, however, when studios start to pressure students who are a few weeks into their yoga practice to sign up for a $5,000 course with promises of all this career growth and opportunity, when the curriculums are stripped of any real philosophy or depth because the spirituality can make Western audiences uncomfortable. Literally look anywhere online. There is so much discourse around how yoga is demonic or yoga is evil and yoga is satanic because people don't understand what the spirituality of yoga actually means. They are afraid of the way that it connects us to the divine, to source, and there is no way of extrapolating the two. You cannot teach yoga without teaching spirituality. They are one and the same, and I will literally beat this drum for the rest of my life. When teachers are handed actual equations on how to cue a class, and this is a real thing, I have witnessed it firsthand, It completely lacks any sort of understanding. And teachers are sent out to go and disperse this information before they've had any time to really develop their own relationship with the practice in an authentic, sustainable, scalable way. When you are taught a formula, it doesn't mean you're taught about the foundation. It means you are taught how to generate a result, how to repeat a framework. Do you understand what's underneath that framework? Can you adapt it and mold it as needed, which is inevitable when you're actually teaching the true practice of yoga? Not in this way. This also breeds a certain type of yoga teacher who is money-minded, extractive, and very disconnected from the roots of the practice. They're very disconnected from what they're actually teaching. And these are the people with classes that have playlists so loud you can't even hear yourself think or even let go of a thought. These are the ones who are projecting their unhealed narratives on students in the name of a Dharma talk. The ones who dance around using Sanskrit or default to English because they don't want to make themselves uncomfortable. These are the ones who are developing these substance-based yoga classes that alter your mental state. I used to push back when people called me a gatekeeper for saying stuff like this, but I don't anymore. Because here's what no one's going to tell you when you sign up for a yoga teacher training. You are not signing up to help people stretch. You are becoming a steward of one of the oldest, most sophisticated spiritual and human development systems on the planet. You are entering a lineage, and one that was passed down verbally with enormous care for thousands of years before it was ever whittled down into this small, portable format. This is what you are signing up for. It is a huge responsibility, and you need to be prepared for it, and you need to do it the right way. Before you commit to anything, start with yourself. The quality of your intention matters just as much, if not more, than the quality of the program itself. Ask yourself what your relationship to yoga is right now. Not what you want it to be or imagine it's going to become, what it is today. How long have you been practicing? Have you explored anything beyond asana? Do you have a personal practice that exists outside of a studio class, just on your own? Or does it only happen when an instructor is telling you play by play exactly what to do, what to think, where to put your body, how to feel? There's no shame in your answer. I just want you to think about this stuff because it's important. A lot of people aren't encouraged to. Let's say that you are considering becoming a yoga teacher. Here's what I want you to think about. Ask yourself how you found out about this training that you're considering. Was it offered to you by the studio where you take classes? Was it sold to you without you even looking for it or inquiring about it? Did a friend rope you in because they wanted company and they were afraid to do it alone? Or did you arrive at this decision on your own after your own inquiry? Who truly benefits from you signing up for this? And the most important thing for you to ask yourself, if you could never earn a single dollar from teaching yoga, would you still want to do it? I want you to sit with that one a little bit longer than it's comfortable because it's probably the most important question that you can ask yourself. If you've gone deep with those questions and you're still here and you're still standing, then here's what to look for when you're looking for a yoga teacher training program. Start with the organization behind the training. Research them. Find out if they pay their teachers equitably, if they have real commitments that they honor and have a history of honoring to diversity and inclusion at the programmatic level, not just on the surface marketing level. That's a key distinction. Look into whether there's any kind of history of abuse or discrimination or cultural appropriation in how they operate or even how they market themselves. A studio that whitewashes itself in the branding will whitewash itself in the curriculum too. Then look at who's actually in the training program. Who are the teachers that are stewarding the knowledge? There should be a range of specialties, schools of thought, and representation. If every single teacher on the roster looks the same and comes from the same background, that tells you something about whose version of yoga you're going to be taught. Then look hard at the structure. What is the ratio of teachers to students? Will you have real access to your teachers to have discourse and inquiry, or will you be one of hundreds of people in a Zoom room? Is there a good enough blend and mix of theory and practical work that incorporates seva, service, accessibility, different modalities? Is it in person? Is it virtual? Is it hybrid? I personally think that having it in person matters, although I understand that online can make it more accessible. But it really begs the question, how accessible does yoga teacher training need to be if being there in person, which is the ultimate aspect of yoga, isn't part of the requirement? Yoga as this energetic and very relational practice loses something significant when it's delivered entirely through a screen or a platform, devoid of that discomfort of human just presence and interaction. We want to be careful that in the name of accessibility, we're not prioritizing convenience over quality and authenticity. If a 200-hour training is condensed into a few days or a weekend or even a couple of weeks, I don't think that's a training. That's just a knowledge dump. You cannot really teach something if you have not embodied it, if you have not sat with it in uncomfortable stillness and discussed it and practiced it and returned to it again and again and again. The minimum should be a few months spaced out and spread out so that the material has time to land and you have time to step away and absorb the knowledge and integrate it in your real life at the same time that you're doing your training. This is where most programs will reveal themselves to you. A serious yoga teacher training program covers the full 8-limbed path of Ashtanga yoga or Raja yoga in depth, not really because it's like a checklist that they have to go through, but because it is the living framework of yoga as we know it. One of many, but the most popular one, the most accessible one to the general public at this modern time. It does cover yoga philosophy with the same weight that it does asana, and not really as a segment that gets squeezed in at the last minute, but it's given importance throughout the training. And better yet, it's incorporated into the rest of the elements as well. It should also reference primary texts like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Bhagavad Gita, and if the training has no primary text at all and it's just their own manuals and frameworks and equations, that's not a mistake or a small little oversight. That is a fundamental flaw. And finally, the history of yoga should be covered honestly and comprehensively through a didactic lens, a conversational lens, covering misappropriation, the commercialization of yoga, the colonization of yoga, the spirituality of practice, including the misappropriation, the colonization, the commercialization of yoga in the West. The spirituality of yoga should not be scrubbed out because it makes people uncomfortable or because it feels like it's religious or somehow discriminatory. It's not. Yoga is spiritual. People might be uncomfortable with that, but they do have to accept it if they're going to be a steward of this knowledge. Spirituality is not the same as religion, and any training worth attending will know that difference and be able to articulate it throughout the course. On asana specifically, you should be taught inclusive language that helps you share this knowledge with a wide range of people in different bodies. It should include mechanics of variations and how to offer modifications for people. It should regularly incorporate props, not as sort of like a weakness kind of an angle, but because it's truly an integral part of the practice. Alignment is key. You should cover the anatomy of postures and understand a little bit more about physiology, especially when it comes to things like pranayama and asana themselves, which have an incredibly huge impact on our physiology. You should not be taught that there is a hierarchy of poses, and I know this is confusing because sometimes classes are framed as having a peak pose, but I think you know what I'm getting at. When it comes to modifications and variations, there is no one right way to do it, and then these are all just like the pretend ways of doing it. They are all valid. Another thing I will say is that physical adjustments don't have to be the default. I personally never offer physical adjustments. I think people know their own bodies, and if someone asks me a question, I will go there and I will offer some guidance. The biggest red flag that overrides all these other things, if the training hands you a formulaic script or an equation on how to teach a class, take a huge slow pause. The confidence in teaching comes from knowledge and experience, not from memorizing. The training that's going to give you a handbook to just regurgitate in their classes is producing performers and just faces for the company. It's just marketing. When you're actually standing in front of a room full of students, you're not going to fall back on formulas and equations, or you shouldn't, is what I should be saying. You should be falling back on innate knowledge and your own lived experience. You can't be present for the people in the room if you're focused on recalling information that you memorized weeks or months or years ago. It has to be internalized. The best training that I've heard described and experienced is one that gives you such thorough grounding in the philosophy and practice that your own voice naturally emerges. It's always obvious when a teacher sounds just like their training material. I often see that students prefer teachers who sound like themselves because the tradition is genuinely now inside of them, and it's something that feels more trustworthy. Here's the last thing that I'll say. Not everyone who loves yoga needs to teach it. That impulse to teach, to certify, to formalize, sit with where it's coming from. It might be coming from ego. If it's knowledge that you're after, there are workshops, there are lectures, there are books, there are podcasts, there are courses, hence why I even created this podcast to begin with, that can deepen your knowledge and understanding of the practice without requiring you to take on the emotional, mental, and financial responsibility before you're ready, or whether you even wanted to. Yoga teacher training should be a choice that you arrive at slowly over time with intention. Yoga teacher training is not something that you should just do by default because you practice and love yoga. This practice has survived thousands of years because of the people who carried it with love and respect and responsibility. You get to decide whether you're going to be one of them. If you enjoyed this episode and look forward to more, consider joining my Patreon, patreon.com/Divya Bala. Make sure you follow Yoga Off the Mat podcast on your platform of choice. And you can find me on Instagram at Yoga Off the Mat podcast and at Divya Bala. Thanks for listening. It's time to get off your mat and go do some yoga.